Every show has that moment. The lead actor walks away, and suddenly everything changes. But here's what nobody tells you. The official story is almost never the real one. Studios claim it was creative differences. Networks say the actor wanted to pursue other projects. But when you dig deeper, when you look at the contracts, the negotiations, the behind-the-scenes power plays, you find something completely different. Some of the biggest departures in TV history weren't about wanting to leave at all. They were about being forced out. And the reasons why will make you see your favorite shows in a completely different way. When an actor leaves a major television show, the press release always sounds the same. We've mutually agreed to part ways. The actor wants to focus on film. Creative differences led to this decision. It's polished. It's professional. It's almost always incomplete. The truth is messier. It lives in the spaces between what's said and what's actually happening. Take the case of actors who've walked away from their biggest roles, the ones where fans still don't know the real story. Studios have learned that controlling a narrative is more important than telling the truth. They've learned that a vague statement protects everyone involved, but it also protects a system that's designed to benefit the network, not the talent. Here's what most people don't realize. When a major actor leaves a show mid-contract, there's almost always a negotiation happening behind closed doors. And these negotiations aren't friendly conversations over coffee. They're high-stakes poker games where millions of dollars are on the table. One side wants the actor to stay. The other side has decided they're too expensive, too difficult, or too dangerous to keep around. And one of these sides always wins. The difference between the story you hear and the story that actually happened often comes down to one thing: power. Who has it? Who's willing to use it? And what they're willing to sacrifice to keep it. Think about this for a second. If an actor really wanted to leave voluntarily, why would a network spend months negotiating? Why would lawyers get involved? Why would there be settlement agreements? The answer is simple. Because nobody actually wanted this to happen. But somebody had to lose. The networks know something the public doesn't. They know that a disgruntled star on set is a ticking time bomb. Lower morale spreads like poison. Cast members stop trusting each other. Crew members notice the tension. And when audiences watch, they can feel it. A show dies not because the writing gets worse. It dies because the people making it have stopped believing in it. So the networks face a choice: renegotiate with an unhappy actor or cut them loose and start over. And more often than not, the actor has no real choice in the matter. Salary negotiations in Hollywood look civilized on paper. A manager sits across from a studio executive. Numbers get discussed. Contracts get drafted. But what's really happening is a battle over control disguised as a business conversation. Here's how it works. A show becomes successful. The lead actor's value skyrockets. Suddenly, they're worth 10 times what they were making in season 1. The network faces a decision: pay the actor what they're now worth or replace them with someone cheaper. Most networks choose to replace them. It's not personal. It's math. But here's where it gets complicated. Replacing a main character isn't as simple as hiring someone new. Audiences are emotionally invested in that actor. The entire show's DNA is built around their presence. So networks have pretend they want to keep the actor, while secretly making the deal so expensive that walking away becomes the only option. This is where the real manipulation happens. The studio comes back with a contract offer that sounds reasonable at first glance. But buried in the fine print are clauses that make the job impossible. Maybe the schedule becomes grueling. Shooting 6 days a week instead of 5. Maybe the actor loses creative input they used to have. Maybe their salary stays flat while everyone else's increases. The message is clear without being stated. We don't actually want you here anymore. Some actors fight back. They hire aggressive lawyers. They leak stories to the press. They demand what they believe they're worth. And sometimes they win. But most of the time, the studios have already won the game before it even started. The networks have something actors desperately need: a platform, a show that reaches millions of people every week, an opportunity that might never come again. And they use that leverage ruthlessly. An actor might make millions per episode, but that's nothing compared to what they lose if their career disappears. The threat isn't spoken. It doesn't need to be. This is what happened to several A-list actors in the 2000s and 2010s. Their shows became massive hits. Their salaries increased. And then, suddenly, the networks decided they weren't worth the price anymore. The actors were presented with impossible choices. Accept a pay cut, take an expanded schedule, or walk away and be blacklisted as difficult. Many chose to leave, and the press releases called it their decision. What nobody talks about is the calculation happening on both sides. The actor calculating whether their career can survive without this show. The network calculating whether they can survive without this actor. And when those two calculations don't match, somebody has to lose. There's a moment in every actor's career when they realize the studio owns more than just their contract. They own their reputation. They own their image. They own the story that gets told about them to the world. This became devastatingly clear when networks started using their media connections as weapons. A studio doesn't need to publicly fire an actor. They just need to make sure that actor becomes unemployable. And in an industry built on perception, that's disturbingly easy to do. Let's say an actor pushes back on a contract offer. Let's say they demand better pay or working conditions. Suddenly, stories start appearing in entertainment news outlets. Sources say the actor is difficult on set. Insiders claim they have demanding behavior. People close to production describe a toxic work environment. These aren't lies, exactly. They're carefully crafted narratives that contain just enough truth to be believable while destroying the actor's marketability. The actor's agent hears about these stories. Their other potential employers hear about them. Casting directors start to hesitate. Movie studios become cautious. And the actor realizes they've been cornered. They can fight the studio and lose their career, or they can accept a bad deal and hope to rebuild their reputation later. One of the most brutal examples of this happened in the mid-2000s, when a major network decided one of their stars had become too expensive. The actor had legitimate grievances, broken promises about scheduling, pay that didn't match their market value, and creative decisions being made without their input. When the actor's team pushed back, the studio didn't negotiate. They attacked. Within weeks, stories flooded the trades about the actor's diva behavior. Crew members were apparently interviewed about conflicts on set. Former castmates made vague comments about challenges working together. None of it was technically a lie, but all of it was designed to make the actor look like the problem, not the studio. The actor eventually left the show. The press release said it was mutual agreement, but everyone involved knew the truth. The studio had systematically destroyed the actor's reputation to force them out without paying the settlement they might have owed. What's chilling about this strategy is how effective it is. Once a story takes hold in Hollywood, it spreads like wildfire. Agents repeat it, executives reference it, and within a few months, an actor who was bankable becomes radioactive. Nobody wants to hire them because the industry has decided they're toxic. This creates a terrifying power imbalance. Networks can do almost anything they want an actor because the alternative, being blacklisted, is worse than any individual negotiation could ever be. So actors learn to accept bad deals. They learn to stay quiet. They learn that complaining is more expensive than suffering. And the studios learn that they don't even need to fire people. They just need to make sure everyone knows the actor is difficult. The rest takes care of itself. There's a specific moment when an actor decides they've had enough. Not enough money. Not enough respect. Enough of the system itself. And when that happens, something unexpected occurs. The studios panic, because stars saying no is the one thing networks can't control. An actor under contract can be pushed around in 1,000 different ways. Their schedule can be changed. Their pay can be frozen. Their creative input can be eliminated. But if an actor simply refuses to show up, refuses to perform, refuses to cooperate, suddenly the entire machine grinds to a halt. A television show can't happen without its main character, and the network knows it. This is why studios moved quickly to eliminate this kind of resistance. They built contracts specifically designed to make refusal impossible. If you don't show up, you don't get paid. If you don't get paid, you can't afford your lawyer. If you can't afford your lawyer, you lose a negotiation. It's a system designed to break resistance through financial starvation. But some actors fought anyway. And their stories reveal something crucial about power dynamics in Hollywood. One famous case involved an actor who became genuinely burned out. The show was demanding. The schedule was brutal. The character had been played the same way for years with no evolution. The actor asked for a break. The network said no. The actor asked for script approval on their character's storylines. The network said no. The actor asked for a reduced shooting schedule to pursue other projects. The network said no, so the actor stopped caring. They showed up, they said their lines. But something had died inside them. It showed on camera. The show's ratings started to slip. Fans noticed the performance had changed. Critics started commenting on it. And suddenly, the studio had a new problem. An unmotivated star was destroying the product. Now, the network faced a choice they hadn't anticipated. They could force the actor to stay and watch the show tank. Or they could let the actor go and try to salvage things with a replacement. Either way, they'd already lost. The actor's power, the power to withdraw their emotional investment, had turned out to be stronger than any contract clause. What's remarkable about these situations is that studios rarely admit what really happened. Instead, they use language like creative differences or mutual agreement to move in different directions. But what actually happened is that the actor found the one leverage point that mattered: their own willingness to fail. This became a pattern. When actors realized they couldn't win through negotiation, some of them won through sabotage, not in a malicious way, necessarily, but by becoming a problem the studio couldn't solve without firing them. A show with low ratings and an unhappy star is worth less money. Less money means less leverage in syndication deals. Less syndication money means a network's entire business model for that show collapses. Suddenly, the actor's departure doesn't look like a firing. It looks like a mercy killing. The network gets to say the actor wanted to leave. The actor gets to leave with their reputation intact. And everyone involved gets to pretend it was nobody's fault. But make no mistake, it was a calculated move by someone. It just took a form that nobody could openly acknowledge. Most people assume that contracts are boring legal documents filled with standard terms. They think studios and actors negotiate over salary, and that's basically it. But the real power in Hollywood lives in the clauses that nobody reads. The fine print, the definitions, the obscure paragraphs buried on page 47 that determine who controls what. These contracts are weapons disguised as paperwork. A typical actor's contract for a television show contains hundreds of clauses. Some are straightforward. How much you get paid, how many episodes per season, what your dressing room looks like. But others are designed to lock an actor into servitude in ways they might not immediately understand. Take scheduling clauses, for example. A contract might say an actor is required to work as needed for production. That sounds innocent enough. But as needed could mean 16-hour days. It could mean shooting 6 days a week instead of 5. It could mean no guaranteed days off. And once you sign that clause, the studio can change your schedule whenever they want, and there's nothing you can do about it except breach your contract. Then there are exclusivity clauses. These clauses say that while you're under contract for a television show, you can't work on certain other projects without the studio's permission. Sometimes this is reasonable. A studio doesn't want their lead actor doing another TV show at the same time. But some contracts are so broad that they essentially own every hour of the actor's life. No film work, no theater, no guest appearances on other shows, nothing without written approval. Here's where it gets sinister. Studios use these approval clauses to control actors. An actor wants to do a prestigious film that might boost their career. The studio says no, not because there's a scheduling conflict, but because they want to punish the actor for asking for better pay. The actor has no recourse except to breach the contract and face legal consequences. Termination clauses are even more brutal. Most people think an actor can be fired only for cause, for behaving badly or breaking the law. But studio contracts define cause so broadly that almost anything qualifies. Missing a rehearsal? Cause. Gaining weight that changes your appearance? Cause. Refusing to do a scene you find offensive? Cause. Speaking negatively about the show in public? Definitely cause. And when a studio terminates an actor for cause, they don't owe that actor anything. No severance. No payment for the rest of the contracted season. The actor loses everything, and the studio can then spread stories about why they were fired, destroying the actor's reputation in the process. But here's the real trap: buyout clauses. These are the clauses that force actors to choose between two terrible options. If an actor wants to leave a show before their contract is up, they have to pay the studio money. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions. This is supposedly compensation for the show losing its star and having to recast and restart production. In practice, it means most actors can't afford to leave. They're locked in by money they don't have, so they stay and they suffer, because the alternative is financial ruin. Some studios have even included clauses that require actors to maintain certain physical appearances, to live in specific geographic locations, or to avoid dating certain types of people who might generate negative publicity. These clauses are rarely enforced, but they're in there. They exist to remind the actor that the studio owns more than just their work. They own control over their life. The most devastating contracts are the ones written with renewal options. The studio has the option to renew the actor's contract for additional seasons, but the actor doesn't have the same option in reverse. This means after season 1, if the show is successful, the studio can force the actor into season 2, season 3, season 4, for years. But if the show bombs, the studio can simply not renew and move on. The actor has no choice, but the studio has all the choices. And when an actor tries to renegotiate these terms, that's when the real power play begins. Because the studio knows that the actor is now famous, now valuable, and now trapped by a contract that was written when they had no leverage. There's a psychological breaking point that happens when someone realizes the system was never designed to be fair to them. For actors on long-running shows, this moment often comes around season 4 or 5. They've made the network hundreds of millions of dollars. They've sacrificed years of their life. They've turned down other opportunities. And then they realize none of that matters. The network doesn't care about loyalty. They never did. This realization is what causes the most dramatic departures. Not anger, not greed, just a cold understanding that the relationship was always transactional, and now it's no longer worth the transaction. One actor who experienced this worked on a show that became a cultural phenomenon. In season 1, they were paid a modest salary, around $50,000 per episode. By season 3, the show was generating over $1 billion in annual revenue for the network through advertising, streaming rights, and international sales. But the actor's salary had barely moved. They were making $150,000 per episode, while the network made billions off their face, their voice, their performance. When the actor's team asked for a significant raise, to something closer to what they were actually worth, the network came back with a number that was insulting, a 10% increase. Nothing more. The message was clear. You're replaceable, and we're going to prove it by offering you almost nothing. That's when the actor's perspective shifted. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about being valued. And they weren't valued. They were used. There's a difference. But here's what most people don't understand. Even when actors reach this breaking point, they often stay. Not because they want to, but because leaving costs more than staying. The buyout clause makes departure financially impossible. The non-compete clause prevents them from working elsewhere. The reputation damage ensures that if they do leave, they'll struggle to find other work. So actors stay in situations that make them miserable. They show up every day to a job that doesn't respect them. They perform in front of millions of people while feeling completely invisible to the people who employ them. And slowly, that resentment poisons everything. This is when shows start to decline. Not because the writing gets worse, though it often does, but because the central performance, the thing that made the show work in the first place, has become hollow. The actor is there in body but not in spirit, and audiences can feel it. Network executives watch this happen and they panic. Ratings drop. Critics notice the decline. Sponsors become nervous. And suddenly, the studio has a choice. Renegotiate with the unhappy actor, or replace them and hope the show survives the transition. Most studios choose to replace the actor. It's cheaper in the short term. It sends a message to other actors that the studio is in control, and it avoids having to admit that they mistreated someone who made them rich. But there's a cost to this strategy that doesn't show up on the balance sheet. Every actor in the industry watches what happened. They see what loyalty gets you. They see that no matter how much you sacrifice, no matter how much you contribute, you're still disposable the moment you become expensive. And they adjust their behavior accordingly. They stop caring as much. They negotiate harder. They trust less. The entire culture of the industry shifts. What used to be a relationship between a studio and an actor becomes purely adversarial. Everyone assumes they're being lied to. Everyone protects themselves first. And shows suffer because the people making them have stopped believing that anyone actually cares about the work. This is a hidden cost of how studios treat their stars. It's not just unfair to the individual actor. It poisons the entire ecosystem. It turns creative collaboration into a war of attrition where everyone loses. Some shows die the moment their lead actor leaves. Not because the replacement is bad, but because the audience's emotional connection to the story was always tied to that one person. You can't just swap out the central character and expect audiences to care the same way. But studios try anyway, hoping nobody will notice. The results are usually catastrophic. One of the most famous examples is a show that had been running successfully for 8 seasons. The lead actor had become synonymous with the role. Fans had grown up watching this character. They'd invested years in the story. But the actor and the network couldn't agree on salary, so the network decided to replace them. They found a new actor. They rewrote some storylines. And they launched season 9 with confidence. The ratings collapsed, not gradually. Immediately, in the first episode, viewership dropped by over 30%. By the 3rd episode, it had dropped by 50%. Fans were furious. They felt betrayed. And the network realized too late that they'd made a catastrophic mistake. But here's what's fascinating. The network didn't admit what happened. They didn't say, "We tried to save money by replacing our star, and it backfired." Instead, they blamed the ratings decline on changing viewer habits, on competition from other networks, on people cutting cable. They blamed everything except the decision that actually caused the problem. What's worse is that this became a pattern. Networks kept making the same mistake, and then they kept lying about why it didn't work. They'd replace a star. The show would tank, and then they'd blame external factors instead of acknowledging that audiences care about the actor, not just a character. There are numerous examples of this. A beloved comedy where the lead actor was replaced. The show lasted 2 more seasons before cancellation. A drama where the star left due to a contract dispute. The replacement actor was actually talented, but viewers stopped watching anyway. A sci-fi series that lost its lead. The show tried to pivot to other characters, but it never recovered its audience. The pattern is always the same. Actor leaves, ratings drop, network pretends it's not connected. Show eventually gets canceled, and everyone moves on. But the real tragedy isn't the canceled shows. It's the actors who get blamed for the decline. When a show tanks after losing its star, people often criticize the replacement actor. They're not as good. They don't have the chemistry. But that's not fair. The problem isn't that the new actor is bad. The problem is that the audience came for a specific person, and that person is gone. Some shows do manage to survive a lead actor departure, but only when specific conditions are met. First, the show's story has to be bigger than any one character. Second, the replacement actor has to be given time to develop their own following, not just asked to recreate what came before. Third, the network has to actually invest in the show instead of cutting the budget as a punishment for the actor leaving. These conditions are rare because most networks don't think long-term. They think in quarterly earnings reports. When an actor demands more money, the network's first instinct is to cut costs, not invest more. So even when a show could theoretically survive a casting change, the network's response makes survival impossible. There's another category of show that dies differently. The one where the lead actor leaves and the show just gets canceled immediately. No replacement. No attempt to continue. The network simply decides that the show's value is so tied to that actor that continuing without them isn't worth the effort. This happens more often than people realize because it's the cleanest option for networks. Cancellation creates a sense of finality. It allows the network to move on without having to face years of declining ratings and negative comparisons to the original version. It's the mercy kill. And it's often better for the show's legacy than attempting to continue with a replacement would have been. But it's still a loss. Studios built on a relationship that shouldn't have been destroyed in the first place. Shows that could have had more seasons. Stories that never got a finish. All because a negotiation failed and a network refused to value the person who made the show possible. If you've ever wondered why studios and networks seem so paranoid about their biggest stars, there's a reason. It's not irrational. It's based on something very real. The terrifying amount of power a star actually has. A network's entire business model depends on a handful of people showing up and performing. That's an enormous vulnerability, and studios know it. Think about the economics for a moment. A television network might spend $50 million to produce a show. That money goes to hundreds of people, writers, directors, crew, editors, producers. But the show's success or failure hinges almost entirely on whether audiences tune in to watch one specific actor. Everything else is secondary. This creates a dynamic where the actor holds more power than they probably should. And studios hate being in that position. They hate being dependent on anyone. So they spend enormous energy trying to diminish that power, to make the actor feel smaller, to remind them that they're replaceable. But deep down, the studios know the truth. The actor is not replaceable. Not really. And that knowledge terrifies them. This is why networks are so aggressive in negotiations. It's not about money. The networks are making billions. So a few million more for an actor is nothing. It's about control. If a studio gives into an actor's demands, it establishes a precedent. It shows that the actor has power. And once that precedent is set, other actors see it. They realize they might have power too. And suddenly, the network loses its ability to control everyone. This is why studios use reputation destruction as a weapon. By making an actor seem difficult or problematic, the network neutralizes the threat. If everyone believes the actor is toxic, then it doesn't matter that they have power. No one will care if they leave. The actor becomes too radioactive to work with, even though the toxicity might have been entirely manufactured by the studio. There's also a deeper fear at play. The fear that audiences care more about the actor than about the show itself. And in many cases, that fear is completely justified. Audiences do care more about the actor. They come for the person, not for the character or the premise. This is why recasting usually fails. This is why losing a star often kills a show. But studios can't admit this fear publicly. If they admitted that their multi-million-dollar show depends on one person, it would undermine investor confidence. It would hurt syndication deals. It would reveal the fragility of the entire system. So instead, studios pretend that shows are bigger than any one actor. They pretend that a character is more important than the person playing it. They pretend that losing a star is just a minor setback. But the way they treat stars tells the real story. They're terrified. They're so afraid of losing control that they'll destroy relationships, burn bridges, and make terrible long-term decisions just to maintain short-term power. Some networks have learned to manage this fear more gracefully. They recognize that taking care of their stars, paying them fairly, treating them with respect, giving them creative input, is actually cheaper than the alternative. The alternative is constant conflict, declining ratings, and having to rebuild with new talent every few years. But many networks still haven't learned this lesson. They still operate from a place of fear, and their stars feel it. The actor knows they're feared. They know they're valued only because they're valuable. And that knowledge changes a relationship fundamentally. This is why so many high-profile departures feel bitter. It's not because anyone actually hates anyone. It's because the relationship was always built on fear and control rather than respect and partnership. And eventually, one side or the other decides that the relationship isn't worth maintaining anymore. When that happens, the departures that result are almost never clean. There are always recriminations. There are always leaked stories and counter-stories. There's always collateral damage, because the entire foundation was rotten to begin with. What's remarkable is that this pattern repeats endlessly. Studios and networks keep doing the same things. Actors keep responding the same way. And the result is always the same. Talented people leave, shows decline, and everyone pretends it had to happen this way. But it doesn't have to happen this way. The only thing required to change it would be for networks to stop viewing their stars as threats and start viewing them as partners. But that would require giving up power. And in Hollywood, Power is the one thing nobody wants to surrender. When you step back and look at all these departures, all the actors who left their shows under mysterious circumstances, all the recasting attempts that failed, all the shows that declined and died, a pattern emerges that goes far beyond entertainment gossip. What you're actually seeing is a broken system. A system where the people with the most power use that power to protect themselves rather than to create better work. A system where fear drives decision-making instead of vision. A system that would rather destroy relationships than admit when it's made a mistake. But here's what's important to understand. This system isn't inevitable. It's not the only way things could work. It's just how things have worked because that's how they've always worked, and nobody in power has been motivated enough to change it. The actors who leave their shows aren't always the villains in these stories, even though they're often portrayed that way. There are people who realize that the system wasn't designed to value them fairly. There are people who decided that their dignity was worth more than a paycheck. There are people who chose to walk away rather than continue being used. And sometimes, there are people who simply had no choice. People who were forced out through calculated campaigns of reputation destruction. People who were offered impossible contracts they couldn't afford to refuse or afford to accept. People whose departures were predetermined long before any official announcement. The networks and studios aren't villains either, exactly. They're institutions designed to maximize profit. And when you design a system purely around profit maximization, certain outcomes become inevitable. You'll exploit the people who make you money. You'll burn bridges without hesitation. You'll lie to protect your interests, not because anyone is evil, but because the system rewards those behaviors. What changes this is transparency. What changes this is audiences understanding what's actually happening behind the scenes. Because studios have power only as long as people believe their narratives. The moment audiences realize that the official story doesn't match reality, the studios lose leverage. This is already starting to happen. Actors are speaking out more. Contracts are becoming more transparent. Audiences are becoming more skeptical of the stories they're told. And slowly, the power dynamics are shifting. But the real change will come when studios realize that treating people fairly is actually good business. When they understand that respected actors perform better, that shows with happy casts are more successful, that long-term relationships are more valuable than short-term power plays. Some studios have already learned this. The ones that treat their talent with respect tend to have more successful shows. Their actors are more invested. Their stories are better. Their audiences are more loyal. It's not altruism, it's just smart business. But many studios are still operating from the old playbook. They're still negotiating from a position of fear. They're still trying to prove they have power by withholding fair compensation. They're still destroying reputations to maintain control. And every time they do, they lose a little bit more credibility. They lose a little bit more power. Because the system only works if people believe in it. And people are starting to stop believing. The actors who left their shows, the ones we never heard the real stories about, they were canaries in the coal mine. They were showing us how the system actually works when it's not constrained by transparency or accountability. They were revealing the gap between what we're told and what's actually happening. And now, because of those departures, because of the gossip and the leaks and the occasional honest interview, we're starting to see the system for what it really is. Not a creative partnership, not a collaboration between artists and institutions, but a power struggle where the person with the most leverage wins, and everyone else has to accept whatever terms they're offered. That's the real story. Not which actor left which show, not which network made which decision, but the system itself, the way it works, the incentives it creates, the outcomes it produces, and whether we as an audience are willing to keep accepting those outcomes, or whether we demand something better. Because ultimately, that's where the real power lies, not with the studios, not with the networks, but with the millions of people who decide what they watch, what they support, and what they're willing to accept as entertainment. The actors who left their shows made their choice. Now it's time to see what choice the audience makes.